My name is Jacob Curtis. I'm a TV journalist in Denver, Colorado. I've been covering the Decriminalize Denver campaign, decriminalizing psilocybin mushrooms, and I'm really happy to talk with Louie Schwartzberg today, director of Fantastic Fungi. Louie, thanks so much for talking with me.
Honored to talk to you.
It was a great time around this time last year, because I remember that Fantastic Fungi was launching in Denver, and that was shortly after the Telluride Mushroom Festival.
Right.
Why did you choose to come to Denver versus somewhere like the Pacific Northwest where there's rainforest?
Well, it's the Mile High City. Kurt is from Area 23 is our distributor, and we strategized in the fact that we did want to open up in Denver first, and then we went to Portland, and we went to Seattle. So yes, we did want to go to communities that we felt would obviously hear our message. We didn't have, we're doing self-distribution, okay? We don't have a marketing or an advertising budget. So the fact that we could fill the theater, sell out the theater weeks on end in Denver had to do with the fact that the word of mouth spread through the mycelial network. And it was so beautiful for me to be able to come to Denver and to see people that are interested in foraging, ecology, food as chefs, healing, psychedelics, the whole decrim movement. All these things kind of overlap, and we launched the mission of having a conversation. So I didn't just show up as like the director, hey, Q&A and learn about filmmaking. The purpose was to bring people in front of the audience who were local, the local forager, the folks from SPORE, which is your decriminalized movement, to be able to talk locally with your audience about the issues that affect them, and then how to create this interconnection, like the mycelial network, where the conversation would continue after I left.
Yeah, and just each one of those showings, a lot of them had a panel that was in front of the audience, and each one was different. They had, every showing had a different panel, so that was quite cool to go to a couple of those.
One of the things that I share this with a lot of people on these interviews, I talk about Denver. Now, the reason why I talk about the showing in Denver is when people were asking the folks at SPORE, like, what happened after the ballot had passed? Well, they got more votes than the mayor, and then the chief of police, the mayor, social services, all these different bureaucracies wanted to have a conversation. Like, what if someone has a bad trip? What if they freak out? Like, how do we handle that? Like, so they went into this big panic. So what happened was they got together with all these department heads, and guess what? The conversation shifted into, how do we help the community? How do we help those that are homeless, drug addiction, people that are marginalized, people that are on the street? And these different departments had never come together and had that conversation. So because of what happened with Decrim in Denver, it enabled a conversation to occur that helped everybody, and people had never been connected before. And I think it's just like a collateral benefit, because the reality is nobody has freaked out on mushrooms. I think only 1 or 2 arrests were ever made in Denver in like 6 or 7 years. So it really wasn't a problem. But the other stuff is significantly a problem, homelessness and, et cetera. So anyways, I love the fact that that happened in Denver.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to another point. You were talking about the mycelial network, and you mentioned SPORE. I kind of wanted to talk, or to get your perspective on this reimagine project, and then also reconsider
Yeah.
the Kickstarter campaign, and who are you trying to reach, and what is your message with those campaigns?
Well, what's beautiful with the album is that these musical artists were inspired by the movie. And rather than just being inspired, they came together and decided to make an album. So I love the idea that, you know, this creative energy can like ripple outwards and inspire other people, and then they can inspire other people. And the fact that people are inspired by seeing the movie. Like right now, we're #1 on Apple TV in the documentary category, and this will blow your mind. We're in the top 10 of all movies on Apple TV.
Wow.
That's Hollywood movies. So it makes me feel good, and I'm very grateful that, you know, you kind of plant the seed and the tree grows, and then there's fruit, and let everybody enjoy the fruit. You know, it's like let that creative energy just ripple out, and I'm very pleased by the reaction of that.
Yeah, no, and that's one thing I've noticed. It just that it has spawned a movement, if you will, or, you know, there are people that are participating. It's not just a watch a film. You know, it is a creative process. And I wanted to ask you about the film. You know, if folks haven't seen it, the visuals are just really incredible. How you get the time lapse of the mushrooms growing. I mean, as a filmmaker, how do you go about that?
Well, a lot of little secrets in my bag. You're a photographer as well, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so what I needed to do, and I've been doing this for 40 years, nonstop, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, is I have 2 cameras rolling time lapse in the studio, because you have to have control of the lighting, you know, day and night, in order to capture the growth. If you stopped filming at night, there would be a big spurt or something would happen. So we basically have grow lights on, and then the photo lights come on during the exposure, and we're rolling 24 hours a day in a controlled environment. Because if a shot for a mushroom could take a week or 2 to grow, well, you can't leave it outdoors, because it gets ripped off, or somebody would it would get rained on, or insects or whatever. So I create little mini sets to make it feel like we're outdoors. And most people assume, even you probably assumed, that I shot everything outdoors. There are a handful of shots that were done outdoors as well, but for the most part, they're indoors, because you have to have total control. I mean, imagine doing macro photography where, you know, if it moves the 1/8 of an inch, you've lost your focus. So I need to be monitoring it constantly to make sure that I'm getting a good shot.
Yeah, and those shots are just so fantastic. My mom really loved the film. She wanted me to make sure I told you that.
Oh, good.
So, and then you know, another thing that you mentioned earlier before we started recording was you talked about some of your imagery being healing, and you were talking about a project at Pacific Northwest Institute.
Yeah.
Could you
Pacific,
expand on that? Oh, excuse me,
sure.
Pacific.
It's okay. It's the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, PNI. And no, this is going to be a groundbreaking experiment. It's a clinical trial where you know, patients are screened first before they, you know, can be part of the program. But it's to treat alcohol addiction. So they're going to start off by watching one of my videos, and the choices are, and we ask the patient, where in the world do you want to go to be healed? And the options are forest, ocean, desert, flowers, underwater. Kind of go to your, like, you know, power zone spot. And it's for the first 30 or 40 minutes during the treatment, when the psilocybin is slowly taking effect, that I think will put you in the right frame of mind. Because no matter what, you are in a square room in a hospital setting which isn't the ideal place, I believe, to experience sacred medicine. I think being outdoors is really great, but of course that is difficult because there's a risk factor and variables of control, etc. So this is a way to, I think, kind of bring the outdoors indoors on a giant 4K 85-inch TV and get the benefit of that. It's being used now at UCSD currently just to help people with anxiety and PTSD, lowering heart rate, respiration rate. This is without psilocybin, just for patients in their room, because I believe it is a healing modality. And I know it is because on Moving Art series I have on Netflix, I've gotten hundreds of comments from people who said, you know, they were suicidal, parents with children with autism, people that have cancer, post-op, pre-op. They watch the video as a healing modality, and I've never made a claim that it is a healing modality. So when you think about the fact that you got healing modalities for like smell, aromatherapy, touch, massage, music, hearing, healthy food for taste, 80% of the data we get comes into our eyes. Why isn't there a healing modality for vision? A direct connection to the brain, a direct connection to the heart, something worth exploring.
Well, yeah, and you know, specifically to psychedelic therapy, you know, one of the things they talk about is set and setting,
Right.
and I mean that just really goes to the setting piece.
Sure.
But also that'll be really fascinating to see the results of that. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on, you know, why is this, why are mushrooms having such a big moment right now? This weekend, 60 Minutes reran their psilocybin story, and then some other big news was the Canada allowed people the right to try who were suffering from end-of-life anxiety. And I know that you just had this podcast with Paul Stamets and Merlin Sheldrake, yeah, author of Entangled Life. And I know you touched on that, but you know, what is it? Why is it that mushrooms and fungi are having this big moment? They're just so different.
Well, because
right?
the mycelium network, right, is underground, and when it needs to reproduce, it sends up these little things called mushrooms. So first of all, I think people have to understand that the mushroom is like the fruit to the tree. The mycelium is this underground organism. And so it is always underground. And I think this underground movement is happening now because look at this pandemic. I mean, if we're not living in harmony with nature, if we're stressing the immune system of the planet, there are going to be consequences. And we've been kind of like, you know, thinking how long can we get away with all this stuff and have no consequences, global warming, all of it. And I think it's a bit of a wake-up call, because I think the mycelium and the mushrooms are telling us to live in harmony with nature. First of all, it never should have been illegal. Back in the late 50s and 60s at Harvard and Stanford, this was the cutting edge of psychology, helping, you know, scientists have breakthroughs with engineering or problem solving. And because Richard Nixon wanted to punish the anti-war protesters, people of color who were not going to vote for him probably, he made it a Schedule I drug. So I think what's happening now is we need to kind of go back to normal. I mean, probably hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on the quote unquote war on drug. And we know the negative effect of mass incarceration. Look at all the pain and suffering that's been created because Richard Nixon wanted to manipulate an election, right? By putting these on as Schedule I. So they never should have been on Schedule I. The research at Johns Hopkins went into a dark hole for 25, 30 years. Everything froze when we could have been learning and having scientific, you know, exploration and research into potentially the benefits, because for thousands of years, indigenous cultures have used psychedelic sacred medicines for shifting consciousness, for a rite of passage for young people to go through, to learn about the oneness of the universe. I think it's a real healthy experience. And as you saw in my movie at Johns Hopkins, the most amazing thing with the people with cancer is they lost their fear of dying. They embraced living because they felt this connection. And why would you want to deny that from anyone who has a severe diagnosis, is perhaps facing their own mortality? It's hard enough that you get this physiological thing going wrong. Do you need to have a mental problem on top of it, freaking out, worrying about what happens when you die, you know? And the traditional religious stories don't comfort me. The idea of heaven and hell and other stories, they don't resonate. They don't resonate with the general population, because people are like, not practicing organized religion year by year, decade by decade. It's falling. And I think this connection with nature is our natural way of embracing really the ultimate religion, which I believe would be loving life.
Yeah, and those scenes where you visited Johns Hopkins in the movie, it was interesting because you got to see the patients laying down on the couch. You got to see the chalice with the small pill in it. What was it like to do those interviews? It must have been emotional. I mean, to see that sort of feeling.
It was, all I could say is I interviewed a lot of different potential patients who were willing to do it. And each, like I do like a Zoom or a Skype call, and you hear their story and it just breaks your heart. People who have had, all kinds of, cancers, and never in a million years would ever think of doing a psychedelic. And it just opened up my mind to how much suffering there is out there regarding this. And so for me, it was a gift to be able to tell, those two stories of Judy and Tony. And thank God they're still alive. Thank God this thing helped them immensely. It's not a cure, but if it, we all believe there's a relationship between the mind, body, and spirit. It's all one, it's all interconnected. And if you can shift your worldview, it's going to help you heal.
Well, I think those are the questions I had for you. I really appreciate you talking with me, and I wanted to congratulate you that the film is doing so well on Apple TV. So thanks very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Well, keep up the great work you're doing, and a big shout out to everybody in Denver for being in a leadership role, not only with psilocybin, but you guys did it with cannabis. Same situation. Why should anybody spend 20, 30 years in jail for having a joint when, obviously people of color are the ones that are going to get, busted, and white kids at an Ivy League school, nothing happens. I mean, you guys have made it normal for people to be able to just live their life, enjoy a little bit of happiness, be free. You guys pioneered it. So big shout out to Denver.
Well, thank you so much. It was fascinating to watch the whole experience happen. So.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Take care, Jacob.
All right.
Bye.
Let's see.